the moment money hits the table, people go crazy. Families start fighting. Business partners stop talking to each other. So money has the power to undermine everything. That is why talking about money is maybe more relevant today than ever. Money is not dirty. Money is not freedom, because it is what you see in it. We would actually go a level deeper than that, because money is ultimately a projection screen. So people who have positive unconscious projections on money, they will say things like money is freedom, money is security. So if you have this projection type, what typically happens in these people's lives is they have no discernible problem with money because they always have money, but their shadow is greed. And the reason why their shadow is greed is if you really deeply in your core believe I can only be free, I can only be secure, I can only be loved if I have money, then of course you need to have as much as possible of this magical substance. Then when you make the first experience of, well, now I actually have the kind of money that I thought would produce all of these experiences in my life, and it doesn't, then your natural conclusion is, well, clearly it's not enough yet. It needs to be double of whatever I have right now, or triple. And that's the answer you get when you talk to millionaires and billionaires. When you ask them, how much more money do you need to feel now it's good? It's always double or triple of what they currently have, regardless.
Trust to Disrupt, the podcast where visionary entrepreneurs, artists, creators, Web3 and crypto minds share visionary conversations and disruptive success stories.
Money is not freedom and money is not dirty. It is whatever you see in it. That is what my guest today says. Hello and welcome back to the Trust to Disrupt podcast. We are still in the context of the shift of the global financial system. After all of the solo episodes with a lot of knowledge and explanations for you, I'm very happy and excited to have another beautiful guest who will help you understand more and a deeper perspective about what this is causing in you maybe, and how you can manage yourself with the relationship with money that you have. And I'm really excited for her to be here. Today, my guest has a master in psychology. She's a master certified coach, a keynote speaker, and the author of the book, Conscious You, Become the Hero of Your Own Story. And she has worked as an executive coach and organizational developer for close to 25 years. She's an absolute expert, and her specialty lies in supporting high net worth individuals and CEOs to become money conscious and align their money with their purpose. Please warmly welcome Nadjeschda Nadja Taranczewski.
Thank you, Judith, for this introduction.
Yeah, we will hear a little bit more about your company, Conscious You, as well. But first, can you please tell us this quote of yours, money is not freedom and money is not dirty, but it's whatever you see in it. What does that mean to you? Why did you say that? And why in this time of digitization of money and identity, why this topic of money is so relevant, maybe even more than ever before?
Well, you asked a question that opens up a big rabbit hole. So let me dive right in. So as you know, one of the areas of focus that I have in my work as a coach and facilitator, and also within my company, Conscious You, is actually the focus on money. And that might be, or is often, a surprising combination for many people, because they think, well, she's an executive coach. Why do we need to speak about money? I don't need to explain that to you, but I want to give you a little bit of history for how I came to this work. So the money work, the way we teach it and practice it, is actually based on the work of my friend and mentor, Peter Koenig. Peter Koenig is a gentleman now in his mid-70s. He has been one of the first cohort, I would say, of organizational developers. So he's been working in this field for 40 plus years. Lives in Switzerland, has done a lot of work with family-owned businesses. And, like us, he has done a lot of vision processes with top teams, talking about values, talking about what they want to change and shift and impact in the world. And then he said he always observed the same two breaking points in these conversations. One breaking point is what he calls source. So the idea of who took an idea and made it become a reality. Yeah. So who's the owner, the energetic owner of an idea? And the other topic, he called money work in the end, because he said money, right? Money, the moment money hits the table, people go crazy. Families start fighting, business partners stop talking to each other. People start pointing at the return on investment and budgets. And, and he's like, yeah, but we just talked about what you want to change in the world. Like, why does this have such a power to disrupt all of the intentions and all of our values? So money has the power to undermine everything. And that is, from my perspective, why talking about money is maybe more relevant today than ever, because we see with all the shifts and changes that are desperately needed in the world right now, if money is the thing that continuously pulls the rug from underneath all of these amazing initiatives, we're not getting anywhere. So now to the question of why did I say, money is not dirty, money is not freedom, because it is what you see in it. We would actually go a level deeper than that, because money is ultimately a projection screen onto which you project aspects of your own identity that, due to processes in your own history, you have disowned. So that sounds mightily abstract. So let me
can you say it again? Because I get what you say, and this is so important. Everyone, when you just listen again, this one sentence is very crucial to understand the whole concept and to open a door for you that you may want to take.
Yes, thank you. So let me maybe try a slightly different route. So I say the same thing, but in somewhat different words. So what is money, right? Money is a human construction. We invented money for specific purposes. By now, much of this purpose is not actually in action anymore. It has become this abstract master of our destiny, right? So we've developed a very intense and very toxic obsession with money on this planet, or at least in certain parts of the world. And we certainly live in one of those parts of the world. Now, if money isn't real in the sense that, money is not gravity, but we treat it as if it was gravity, right? As if it was a law of nature. And that is not helping us when we want to develop new ways of being with ourselves, with each other, and with the world. So if money isn't real, if we can at least agree on, well, it's an invention that has its uses in certain areas, then the question is, what is money? And when you ask people the question of what is money, you will get as many different answers as people in the room, at least, right? So amongst the answers that we traditionally get is money is freedom, money is security, but also money is dirty, money destroys the planet, people with money are corrupt. Right? So we have a huge spread of answers of what is money. But if you write a flip chart with all of these answers and you have 30 things on the flip chart, then the question again is, well, but if money is all of that, then what is money? And that was one of Peter's first observations, that he said, you know what? I think money is actually nothing but a projection screen. And what we project onto money are human qualities, because of course money is not freedom. And of course, money is not dirty. I mean, it might be literally dirty, but in a way, all of that is human stuff, right? So he came to a point where he thought about money through Carl Gustav Jung's lens of projections, and saying, well, if money is a projection screen and what we see in money is human stuff, then that might explain our relationship with money. Because somehow I have dissociated from my own capacity to be free, but also my own capacity to be dirty, and projected it onto money. And as long as it's tied to money, I have this weird relationship with money where I'm not free in my relationship with money, because it serves a specific purpose that goes way beyond the original intention of money. So I'm going to pause here for a moment, because I'm sure you have questions about that.
I love it. And I just wanted to say something on that, because what you've just described, everyone, when you listen, right? Maybe you have come across on social media or somewhere else the classic narrative of money coaches, which talks about the relationship that we have with money one way or the other. And what Nadja just beautifully started to open in first words and sentences is actually the level and layer that are so much deeper when you include the idea and the concept that there is the projection part includes aspects of ourselves that we abandoned mostly unconsciously, right? But this is so much deeper and goes so much further than just, in quotes, saying, I have this and this relationship of money because I have a belief around it that it represents this and this. To have awareness of these things as a first step obviously is beautiful, but taking it to the level that Nadja just opened up is game changing. Can you share a little bit why this makes such a difference to go beyond the sheer level of awareness of, okay, that's what I think about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we actually, you already expressed it very nicely. We actually say that money work at the core is identity work, right? Because money has the power to take us to the deepest, most unknown parts of ourselves in incredible speed. And I will give you an example in a moment to illustrate that a bit more. But maybe let me talk just for a moment a bit more about this idea of projections and what Peter, credit where credit is due, did find out about what types of projections are actually out there, because that can illustrate it and people might be able to connect it to their own story as well. So he essentially observed that there are sort of three types of projections out there. The first type of projections are what we would call, quote unquote, positive projections. So people who have positive unconscious projections on money, they will say things like money is freedom, money is security, money is luxury, maybe even money is love. Now, if you have this projection type, what typically happens in these people's lives is they have no discernible problem with money because they always have money. Yeah, so they're always in the plus and money flows to them easily, but their shadow is greed. And the reason why their shadow is greed is if you really deeply in your core believe I can only be free, I can only be secure, I can only be loved if I have money, then of course you need to have as much as possible of this magical substance. And then when you make the first experience of, well, now I actually have the kind of money that I thought would produce all of these experiences in my life, and it doesn't, then your natural conclusion is, well, clearly it's not enough yet, right? Because, it needs to be double of whatever I have right now, or triple. And that's the answer you get when you talk to millionaires and billionaires. When you ask them, how much more money do you need to feel now it's good? It's always double or triple of what they currently have, regardless of how much it is. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's the shadow of greed. And you have money, but you're actually never unconcerned about money. And people who've taken this path often make the experience that they are not actually suddenly free to do what they love to do in the world, because suddenly money becomes their job. And then they're busy making sure it doesn't get less, for sure, because that's, the absolute worst. But they also need to make it work for them to make sure that money makes money. Yeah. And that becomes a profession. Then there is another type of projection, and those people have unconscious negative projections on money. So if you really dig deep, they will say things like money is dirty. People with money, are evil, destroy the world, are corrupt. Whatever they have learned in their history with people with money is what they project onto money. Now, if that's your pattern, you will see it in your accounts as well, because you will likely never really have money. And your account is, the moment you make money, you lose it. Somebody takes it away from you. You suddenly have a huge tax bill that you didn't see coming. Money just sort of goes poof. Yeah. The shadow that you have is disgust. So people with unconscious negative projections unconsciously push money out of their system because a part of them wants to be nowhere near all of this horrible stuff that they associate with money. And then we have people, and I'm assuming that you and I know quite a few of them, including, by the way, myself. We call them washing machines, and they have a wonderful mixture between positive and negative projections on money. And as long as they're unconscious, they create a movement where they sort of flip-flop between both extremes, right? So one moment they're in the let's change the world and save the planet mode, right? Often impact investors. I want to do something amazing with my money. So I find all of these amazing founders and I'm going to further your cause. And, you're like, great. You need to be out there. Until an insecurity in them is triggered and suddenly they flop to the other side where they want to know what's their return on investment. Then they want to see spreadsheets. They want to see all of these detailed calculations. They, put the clamps on and say, well, if you aren't profitable within the next year, then I'm going to pull the rug. Then the founder who's getting funded by these investors feels like in a Jekyll Hyde situation because they never know who they're going to meet tomorrow, right? And those people, if you look at their account movement over a lifetime, it's often very wavy. They will have moments where they have a lot of money and then they will lose the money, and then have a lot of money and they will lose the money. So because they're constantly flip-flopping between greed and disgust, right? So, and let me now undermine this underscore this with a concrete example. So I was working with an entrepreneur who had the feeling that money was just not really strong in his system. Like he and we talked for a while, and after a while it just felt weak, like really weak. And then I started asking him a bit about his money history and also his experience with money in his family, and who had money in his family. And we came to a point where he was beginning to make a connection between his money relationship and his father. And he experienced his father as incredibly impotent. So the person in his family who had money was an impotent man. And then what we do in the money work is we take a statement like either money is, or a person with money, in his case, it was my father is impotent, replace the word my father with I, and then we test on an energetic level, what does this sentence do in your system? Because if there is resonance in your biography, you will have a physical reaction to the sentence. If I were to ask you to say the sentence, for example, you would probably just sort of shrug and go, well, okay, I'm impotent, like whatever, right? Because it doesn't mean anything in your biography. But for this particular entrepreneur, he could in the beginning hardly say the sentence, right? That was all of his worst fears. So in a way, he had projected impotence on people with money and money. He didn't want to be impotent. So he had created a system where he pushed money out of his system. And the way to have a healthy relationship with money is actually to integrate and accept his own impotence. And that is not just a sexual impotence, right? It's the impotence of not being able to make a dent in the world, of not affecting the change he wants to affect, of not, not keeping his relationship, of, weakened relationships with his children. So it was all the areas in his life where he felt impotent. So that's the first piece then of money work, is finding the shadow that you have outsourced onto money or people with money, and make peace with that in your own identity.
Thank you for elaborating on this. I'm excited. I'm buzzing. I'm like, yes, let's do this all. Like everyone needs this basically. And there's a couple of things I want to add or just, elaborate also on a little bit. So first of all, everyone who's listening, especially if you are entrepreneurial in any way, because there's a lot of people who run their own businesses or multiple businesses that are listening here. So if you can identify yourself in any of these, please reach out to Nadja. We have all her contact data in the show notes and in the description of the episodes. This work is super, super powerful. So whether you want it just for yourself or you want it for some sort of your organization in any way, she has different opportunities and options through her company, and which, by the way, now is a good moment to share a little bit more about that before we continue on the depth of what you shared.
Actually, can I give you one more example? Because just to make it round, I sort of feel I would like to give you a positive money story, as positive quote unquote, right? So that people have a bit of because people might say, yeah, but I don't have any of these negative thoughts around money, right? Money in my life is fine. I have enough money. But what I often find, and I'm sure you know that from your own clientele too, is even people who objectively have all the money they need, are not feeling secure around money.
Yes.
Right? And if you talk to them, you might get some, relatively simple sentence like money. What is money for me? Well, money is security, right? And money is how I secure my family. But what they're creating, if that's their positive projection on money, is they have disowned our human capacity to be secure and to find security because we're alive, and have outsourced it onto money. And suddenly money is like a lifeline that if it is not there, you feel you're going to die, right? And it becomes very existential very fast. And the result of it then often is that these people, if you ask them, what is the most important thing in your life? They will always say, my family, my children, my wife. If you ask them how much time do you actually spend with the things that are the most important things in your life, right? Silence. Because they don't, because they're so busy creating security that they completely neglect the things that are the most important things in their life. So if you believe that money makes you free, what it actually creates is it makes you incredibly unfree. Right? So even if people have positive projections on money that are not conscious to them, it's not really a positive thing, because the outcome is always the same. As long as it's a shadow, as long as you're not aware of it, it will create havoc in your life and your relationship and in your business relationships as well.
Thank you for adding this. It makes a lot of sense. When you said it's a lifeline, the word that came to mind for me was basically like a crutch.
Yeah.
Because, you hold the power, also in the example that you gave about the client that had this struggle or the connection to impotence or potency. That is the same thing. It's my creative power. Yeah. And if I re-own and remember, reintegrate these parts of me that I know that I can create that just because I am. And then I can be the person to be offering the space to my family, my loved ones, exactly. To myself. Yeah. Right? Very important, to myself. Then this is a lot of liberation. So yes, absolutely. So before I share more details about what you do in your company, the other thing I wanted to add is I can find myself in two areas that you have displayed, the two from these three different layers and versions and perspectives of the reflections and the projections. Because what resonated as well a lot is the part around disgust. When I work through all of my money stories, and certainly there's more to come, but all of the things that I've done, disgust definitely came up as well because of my history. If you guys listen to this a lot or for a while, follow me, the abuse story I experienced when I was a child. There's no room now to dive into this, and it's not necessary. But working through that, obviously this topic came up, and it was surprising back then, because I didn't know before, that how much this was tied to financial stability and ability to create something. Yeah. That was even before I was running my own business. Absolutely. Being employed somewhere, but still being aware and learning how much this is connected. Like, oh my goodness. But then also I find myself in what you described, this, the roller coaster, being super energetically involved and excited and being on this like high energy flow, and that's great and things are flowing. But then some sort of inner insecurity at some point kicks in, bringing up the shadow of whatever aspect it is. So I feel, and that's what I'm seeing with clients of mine as well, a lot of entrepreneurs, and again, it's no matter at what stage with their business they are. Even if they're highly successful, they run multiple businesses. I've had people who run like 10 different business streams, and you work from the outer perception, we say like, whoa, wildly successful. But then if you dive in, they are trapped in exactly what you've been describing. They thought it will free them or create security and safety or enable a certain lifestyle. And on the outer appearance, yes, it does. But within, it is either hollow or whatever else is somewhere inside. Absolutely. That needs to be addressed by that. And this is what I feel everything that you've explained have been great examples and a bit of a showcase into what not only you do when somebody hires you one-on-one as the executive coach, but you've gone beyond, and you shared a bit more when we had our conversation before we started recording. You found at some point that it's not completely scalable, obviously, when we do one-on-one work. And if we're in an organization and we really want to create a systemic change And a true evolution that is sustainable, it requires a different approach. And this is what you do with your company, Conscious You. I'm just going to share a few sentences that you've shared with me what they do, and people can also find on the website, right? So your organization or your company supports other organizations to reinvent themselves, and you put it as a conscious tribe, which I absolutely love. And I want to ask you in a moment why you put it exactly that way, why this tribe and the word consciousness is coming up. So they become a thriving community where people invest in inner work and where they understand the big picture, live deep connections, and cultivate conscious rituals. And with that company, you offer blended learning coaching programs that make cultural transformation scalable and that promote employee engagement at a level of the organization. And there's something that is standing out, which you put out on purpose, which is one of the programs called CU Money, open to the public, not only to the organizations, and that you say supports people from all walks of life to do what they love and follow their purpose with and without money, as you put it. So can you share a little bit how you came up with these connections of having consciousness, but also the money and the tribe element in there? And also, why have you decided to put this particular program around money to a broader audience?
Yeah, so the idea with the scalable culture development, if you want, was actually born out of a pain. And the pain was that after having worked as a facilitator in culture transformation processes for 15 years or so, I've been, in 2006, I was trained by McKinsey to become what they called a facilitator of transformation, where we went into client organizations and worked with top leadership teams around deep personal insight processes, coming from the hope that if we enlighten, quote unquote, these leaders, that will create sort of a trickle down effect throughout the entire organization and really shift the system into a more human centric organization. What I saw in reality is, as much as I love these intense workshops and to be in a room with a group of people for 3 days or even 5 days is absolutely incredible. But the reality, and I think you've seen this as well, is for those people for whom the penny really drops, they end up leaving the system because suddenly they have their eyes wide open. They're like, I cannot deal with this insanity anymore. I just have to go. I have to do something else. The others stay behind with a lot of really great intentions about what they're going to change moving forward. And they just get eaten up by a system that hasn't shifted. Right. So the cynicism in their teams, the inability to translate what they have learned on a personal level into a language that actually makes sense for anybody else, it doesn't trickle down. So after doing this for many, many years, and I'm just thinking, well, maybe we just have to tweak this and tweak that, and then shift system change is really going to happen. I had to come to terms with the fact that this was apparently not the path. Right. So the idea for Conscious You was then born out of that pain, because I thought, yeah, but I do believe in a necessity of inner work. I really desperately think we need to up-level our consciousness. However, I came to the understanding it needs to happen for everyone, or at least a significant number of people in a system. Right. We now know that systems change if you have a tipping point in terms of how many people are part of the change. So we need to be able to include more people. And it needs to take longer, right? So the 3-day thing is great fun and a wonderful Kickstarter for some processes, but it's not going to change the world because you can't retain all the stuff that you've learned. So our programs are essentially micro-learning approaches where you do a little bit of work every day for 3 months. You do it integrated in a cohort, because I really also am a strong believer that e-learning is not the path. We need human relationships, right? You need to talk about this with your colleagues. You need to be part of an intense dialogue around your insights, the blocks that you see, to hear other people and their learning process. So that's what we do in Conscious You. And by now we have 5 different programs, I would say, that all look at consciousness development, but, either through a very personal lens, through communication, through diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, through this idea of source that I talked about. So, how do you actually stimulate ownership in an organization from a source perspective? And finally, as well, money. But the reason why we have opened up CU Money, the program, to be open to the public, is that I realized through the money work, you reach points of trauma in no time. And the personal story, Judith, that you shared around your own abuse story, I cannot tell you how often we land at this point exactly, right? Because very often, especially women that I've worked with, they feel that there's a dirty quality to money because the people who abused them were people who had the money, right? And they were dirty. And it's just easier to not have this feeling of dirty on often members of your family that you were dependent on. So you projected it onto money. Yeah. And then money is something that you cannot really have in your system because it keeps re-triggering your trauma story. So, right, for that reason, and you've been through this process with yourself, I realized most organizations that I've been acquainted with, they don't yet have the level of intimacy, trust, capacity to process deep emotions that they need to have that conversation amongst colleagues. So therefore, CU Money is one of our open to the public programs, because I figure if you feel attracted by these topics, then you need to first do your own work. And then maybe at some point you can take your organization along. But the first step is definitely your own process.
Thank you for sharing. One question before I would love to take this over from the money topic to then what is going on now in the global financial system, that making it a bit bigger, but still the interaction in everyday life is the same then for you and me when the money gets digitized. But now I lost a thought.
Well, I realized I didn't answer one of your questions, which was the whole, why conscious tribes? Why do I think that's important? Should I?
Please go ahead and I'll find the other thought back.
Okay, great. You find the thought. So the notion with conscious tribes came from, just looking at how we operate as people, right? We are social animals. We need people around us. And what we now know from tons of research also done in organizations is bad relationships at work make people ill. Right? They lead to burnout. They lead to you completely feeling isolated, feeling alone, feeling hopeless. So one of the biggest factors in healthy cultures is the quality of relationships. So my thought was, since our nature is to be tribal, but of course, now we associate tribalism with a lot of bad stuff because it's also territorial. It's, the whole in-out, the othering, all of that is also part of being part of tribes, because it's our natural tendency to create borders and to define very clearly who's in and who's out. So for me, the permeability that I think makes a tribe healthy, that is accomplished by making a tribe more conscious, right? And by helping people to give them tools to understand what is happening within myself, what is happening within us in our relationship, what is happening in the collective of a team or even of a bigger collective of an organization. And if we have that, then we don't need to be so territorial, and we can take the good stuff of a tribe and leave the more toxic stuff, hopefully, behind as often as possible, right? So I feel we need as many tribes as we can be part of right now, online and offline. And an organization, if you feel you're part of a tribe that is working towards a common purpose and you can express your own purpose under the umbrella of this tribe, then it can be an incredible gift to be a part of an organization.
Thank you for elaborating, because it also connected me back to the thought I had, which was exactly around the consciousness part. So when you open this up now more, those who listen, who may have, or you may be hearing the way that you describe this work and this process, that might be new, because we're using a lot, and you're using a lot on purpose, these words and terminologies of consciousness in connection with money, but also in connection with success. And then just how you describe the tribe stuff, several layers of connections. Before we talked a little bit about, we also need something like an inner new operation system. How do we act, behave, patterns that we follow? So I feel always the whole world, and that is on the meta perspective, but also in every individual, we are in the learning process and the shift of learning how to operate more multidimensionally, which is not, we're moving away from the transactional A plus B equals C, and it's all linear, and we have one step and then the next step and then the next step, which is a little bit the old system, which comes back when we now speak about consciousness and these different layers of connection and the projection. You know, everything that you have also shared has many different layers to look at. It's never just one thing, and it's never linear. It's always on multiple layers and from multiple different perspectives and the aspects. And maybe that is the core essence that is new, or where we are moving away from. Also, when people be like, okay, I've been dealing with money things, but maybe you have gotten to the point now so far that it's mindset work, or that is, okay, I have to find out the 2 limiting beliefs that I hold, which is great, but that is also a little bit more than the older approach. It's more one-dimensional. It is a bit more linear. Okay, there's one thing, and then I have another thing, and then I have a result.
Yeah.
Okay. And what I'm hearing, and this is what I wanted to share with people listening, to keep this new idea, if it's new to you, and allow to let it interact with you and to see what it does with you. Even if I asked you now to say, like, what do you, to your understanding, how would you describe consciousness? And maybe you can't at this point, and that's okay. But allow this to marinate a little bit, because we're talking about this here on purpose. This is consciousness. And I want to hear what you think, Nadja, as well. To me, is the pathway that we need to explore and allow to explore a little bit more. What is all within it is, to me, the bridge, if you will, to figuring out how can we create these things in a new way, and how can we manage this shift that we're in. Would you say this aligns with how you see it, or do you have another perspective on that?
Yeah, no, I would agree. And maybe another term that I would throw in there is, I do feel that part of consciousness development is increasing our capacity to hold more complexity, right? And the first step for that is holding complexity within ourselves, right? Because we are hardly able to understand what's going on in our own psyche. And, then we haven't even had a relationship, right, where that is exponentially more complex. And then you throw in kids, and then, and it just goes boom. And the complexity is barely handleable. So what we need to develop is our understanding of the different layers of identity within us, right? And to find a more integrated version of myself, where I realize I'm a multitude of things, and this multitude of things and realities and feelings and bodily sensations and, and spiritual experiences, that meets you. And you're also this multitude of selves, of experiences, right? So the first step for handling more complexity is increasing my capacity to handle more complexity. And I think that is needed, because the complexity we're confronted with right now is exploding.
Yes, I love that. And this is a beautiful bridge over to this new digitized monetary system, because speaking of complexity, hello and welcome.
Yeah.
There's even more complexity, right? By technology adding this beautiful layer to it, right? For those of you who have also explored the other podcast episodes, you have heard these terminologies. If this is the first one you're catching, the last 10 episodes explain all of the things. For example, buzzwords are blockchain technology, programmable money, it is digital identity, it is tokenization. There's so many also new words that vocabulary-wise we have never heard before. We have no conceptualization of what that actually means. Plus, then is something, again, online. Then we hear that our money gets digitized. So maybe your fiat money might be taken away at some point, or, then there's all the narratives around the potential danger of maybe your bank account gets frozen or your access gets limited. And what does it actually mean when your identity is digitized? And do you have choices, or is that all deployed just on you? Right? There's a lot of questions that come up that create so much complexity. And what I get a lot feedback wise from either people on TikTok, where I share more content about this, or also I have a Telegram that is called Sovereign Humanity. And that also has, for the German speaking listeners here, there's a German lag within there, but an English speaking as well. And you can also find all of these in the description. So, but 2 layers that come up in the feedback loops, if you will. And one is the overwhelm, the potential of not understanding the technology and feeling a little bit like, oh my goodness, I don't want to dive into that. But the other one ties back to a fear or a resistance or worrying about that something or someone might have control over me, that, you know, I'm disempowered. I lose control. And that obviously triggers a very, very deep fear in us as a human, right? So while there's this bigger complexity, and as you said, we need more capacity to walk in that, but in that capacity, we also need agency, right? We need to be able to move and to navigate. So in my words, it's also always connected to sovereignty. So we have this old technology, but then we have the consciousness, we have ourselves and everything. So there's a solution on the one end with technology and with all of these things. There's also opportunity, but maybe we don't even get to the point of exploring. And there's another beautiful quote of yours. You said, blockchain is not the answer either as a solution, as long as we don't integrate the shadow. So can you help people see that connection a little bit here?
Yeah, you know, I think at the end of the day, regardless of how complex something is, you know, and of course, this whole new digital world, it is complex. But what we're building are tools. And these tools can be really, really helpful. But at the end of the day, they are limited by the consciousness of the person wielding the tool. And one of the examples that I like to use is, you know, imagine you have a hammer. Hammer is a great tool, right? I can hang up artwork with a hammer in my house. So that's fantastic. But I can also use it to murder somebody. I can knock somebody's head in with a hammer. It's not the fault of the hammer, right? It's my intentionality. It's my capacity to understand how I can use this hammer in a way that creates more good versus creates more damage. So for me, all of this new technology can be seen like a hammer. Like we can use it for anything and everything. It can be, I believe, potentially a tool for liberation, but only if the person using this tool have the right level of understanding and have the right level of consciousness in the way they deploy it. So for example, if, you know, what we've seen with blockchain, and I'm not claiming by any means that I'm an expert in this, right? But it started out with these wonderful ideas of democratization, of freeing ourselves from the yoke of, governments and external control. And so a lot of grassroots movements and sort of nearly anarchistic ideas were connected to blockchain. And then Bitcoin coming into the field and being, you know, like there's the savior idea of this is going to set us free. What I now observe is Bitcoin has turned into yet another quick way for finance bros to make money with no work. Right. And if that's what you connect Bitcoin to, then Bitcoin is not going to make anything good in the world. And blockchain will not be used to its fullest potential if that's the understanding we come from. So I feel we need to integrate. We need, again, to look at what are we projecting, right? And if we connect it to the same old around feeling this will make me safe, this will, bring luxury and freedom into my life, then we're recreating the same pattern under a different guise. It's nothing different, really. Yeah. And to your point, I do think one of the big reclamations we need to integrate, and it's one of the hardest ones for me as well, is saying I'm out of control and finding peace in that, because it's true, right? So there's something about understanding that none of these tools are going to give me control, because there needs to be an integration of the fact that, to a large part, the control that I believe I have is an illusion anyway.
I love that you dive into this part and this aspect here, because usually that desire for control, again, is some sort of a crutch that we crave or that we think is the solution for us to feel, coming back to what we've talked about, feeling safe. Mm-hmm. So whether we use that as the bridge to be like, okay, when I'm in control, I feel safe. And how do I create this? By accumulating money. Yeah. Tying back to this, right? This could be one version of someone. And I love that we're kind of closing the circle on this topic in this moment, because what it all comes back to, no matter how evolved the technology is, and we can follow that, right? There's evolution. I feel we always get to be curious to explore this, but at the core, the technology, just as the hammer example that you used, will not bring the solution if we do not take ownership of who we are. And we need to stop looking for crutches, solutions that are outside of ourselves. And that is sometimes so hard to do because it's so uncomfortable to face things within ourselves versus being like, oh, in an company environment, in an organization, it's a lot of times, oh, let's just do another process optimization, or, let's change the strategy, these beautiful buzzwords. But for ourselves personally, it's always like, let me buy something more, or let me make more money, or let me, whatever it is, we're looking for things that are outside of ourselves that in the end bring another result of potential either fear, worry, disappointment, or feeling even worse than before, because we go in the same loop and the same cycle again. So how would you describe, maybe how can people find a good bridge between, yes, we cannot maybe ignore that technology and the system is evolving, and we have connection points with money every day, go to the supermarket, you buy something online, you can't avoid this, at least at the point where we are right now. We don't know where we'll be in 20, 40, 50 years, but at least for now, it is part of our life and how everything is organized. So how can we find a good mix maybe in still connecting and keeping on learning so we don't get left behind on that, but at the same time, being in a more conscious state in interacting with it and step by step taking back ownership? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, and maybe it's what you've already described in a way, is to continue learning, stay curious, right? So, and I love what you've done with your 10-part podcast series. So to digest something like that and to then use that maybe as a starting point for consciousness development by looking at what is that creating in me, right? If I listen to one of your podcasts, what is a feeling that comes up in my body? Because I think the danger of technology is that it takes us further away from being natural beings. And I don't believe that technology is going to be the savior on any of the problems we have. I think it could be a wonderful ally, but again, only if we learn how to use it. And in learning how to use it, we need first to figure out our own operating system and the operating system that we have in relationships, right? Because that is what is going to save us, is our connection to ourselves and our connection to others, and not the technology. So I would say that anything can be used as a gateway into consciousness development if I pay attention to how does that make me feel. So for example, I might be listening to a podcast by you around blockchain, and I notice when I really feel my body, something is constricting, right? Something feels really tight. So then I can ask myself, what is that? Right? And it might be this fear of being left behind, of being too stupid, of having missed the boat. I should have looked at that 10 years ago and I didn't. And then to allow myself to feel it, right? Because we shut down feelings so quickly, especially the ones that we deem unpleasant, but they are the gateway into a deeper self-contact, into more self-compassion, more aliveness, more love. So I would say, continue learning, educate yourself, and notice, how do I feel? And that can be a first entry point into a deeper consciousness.
Thank you. I feel that gives a tangible baby step for somebody who wants to do that. But maybe also it's a good idea to get your book. You created a beautiful book, Conscious You, Become the Hero of Your Own Story. Is that also helpful for somebody who wants to?
Of course. I mean, that's why I wrote it, right? It just a disclaimer, the book doesn't actually include the money work, because that's something I'm looking at, writing a book just about money work, because I think it's such a big topic right now. But it gives you a lot of very useful tools that I have used in my own life and that I continue using with my clients, that give you bridges into how can I be with myself in a way that isn't disempowering, that doesn't shame myself, that doesn't produce more guilt and more constriction, and rather allows me to discover my multifacetedness and the beauty of who I am as a person.
Amazing. We'll also put the link for the book for anyone who would love to start this journey. And maybe it's a good combination, because as we've just learned, the quintessence is, right, the consciousness journey, your own personal journey. That's very aligned to my teachings and whatever I'm helping people to walk through outside of the pure educational part here about the new system. And the technology is exactly the same thing. You need to lead yourself first at a higher capacity, at a more sovereign level, etc., and remember all of that which is in you that gives you more space and more capacity to handle all of the other things, including the new monetary system and all of the things that are coming. So coming to an end slowly, I would love your take. Obviously you are a psychologist, you are an entrepreneur, you are a conscious human being. When you look at money as the concept, the evolutionary part that is now happening through the digitization, but still it's a medium of exchange somehow. What do you feel is the role of money also changing? When we consider this fact, the topic of asset tokenization, when we are aware that the whole approach is changing, that things that could not be liquid as an exchange medium, like raw materials or real estate, all of a sudden will be assets and values that are exchangeable and tradable as well. Do you feel this is all more just a different version of the same thing, or does it really give a new systemic approach, like in the role that this can have for us as humanity? That's a big question.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. So I think it carries the potential, huge potential. Yeah, so it's nearly like turning, a hammer into a whole like Swiss Army knife with a million different tools connected to it, and you can all pull them out, and you can build your own house with this little Swiss Army knife. And again, it's still only a tool, because the underlying question for me always reminds of what is your intention, right? So if you tokenize real estate, for example, for the purpose of what? Right? So if your driver is still to get rich quick in the most painless way, right, then you haven't actually resolved anything in your consciousness. Because what we see through the money work, when people really do it deeply, is the role of not just money, but the role of wealth, and the definition of what is true wealth in my life changes. So the money work that we do through See Money certainly does not make you rich. It doesn't create, eternal abundance or anything like that. What it creates is a greater degree of freedom of using money as a tool towards the purposes, and the purposes, but also your life purpose in accordance with your values, and to be free to do that. And what you might discover is actually, maybe I need less money than I thought I needed. Right. So there is a whole nother conversation that we're not going to go into now, but the whole degrowth movement, all of the people who sort of scream, don't we have enough? Do we need to limit consumption? Do we need to limit how much we're spending, how much we're growing? All of that, it's all connected to our addiction to money. So once we change or untie ourselves from this addiction to money, it's literally like we don't need to drink anymore this alcohol to feel good, because we realize our feeling good, our, wealth being comes from a completely different place within us. And money is only one of the things that can sometimes benefit that, but it's not the main driver anymore.
Beautiful. I will not dilute any of your words now. Perfect closure of this. Everyone, you may even want to go back another 2 minutes and re-listen to this last part that Nadja shared. Thank you so much, because it actually shifts the whole question and the whole conversation to a point that is really serving. I fully agree to that. Beautifully said. And at the end of this podcast episodes with guests, I always have 3 questions. It's a question and a quick answer, just the first impulse that comes up. If you're good to go on that?
Yes, go for it.
The first one is about the podcast name. It's called Trust to Disrupt. What does that mean to you?
Well, perhaps that ties back to the part of our conversation where we talked about the increasing complexity, right? So I would read it in a way you can trust that things will disrupt you, right? And finding also trust in that being a potentially amazing thing, right? To lose the fear of disruption. That is my interpretation.
I love it. Thank you. Completely different direction. Who would you love to listen to on this podcast? Is there any name that pops up? Anyone else you would love to hear in this conversation here?
Yeah, so recently I started dealing with the works of a gentleman called Will Ruddick, who founded Grassroots Economics. And I find it really fascinating. He's an American who has lived in Kenya for the last, 8 years or something, and is looking at new monetary systems. And since he's also an economic physicist and developer, he's developed a whole platform where they now have a parallel currency system in Kenya, but this system has been adopted in different parts of the world as well. And I really love his way of thinking. So I think he might be an interesting person to connect to.
Thank you for bringing this name up. I have been connected to his work, but it's been a while. So circling back here now, thank you. And the last one is there any other impulse or advice as final closing word you would want to give to anyone on this journey in the world right now?
Well, staying with the topic, I would say dare to de-taboo the topic of money and start having conversations with people around money. So sometimes when people ask me, what's an easy first step? I say, how about you host a money dinner and you make it a potluck dinner, make it easy. Everybody brings something. But the topic of the evening is talk about your money history in your family over the last 3 generations, right? And how do you think it impacted your own relationship with money? I promise you, you'll have such a fascinating evening. And we need to start talking about money. It cannot stay in this box that nobody wants to touch, but everybody is magnetized by. That doesn't work.
That sounds like a potentially explosive evening, but in the very best way.
Yeah.
So thank you for this tip. If anyone is actually doing this, please let us know. Comment under the podcast. Let us know how it's going, because this is a great thing. Also, if you share, then other people might get motivated to also do that. And by this, we can maybe start another ripple effect around this topic. It's a beautiful idea. Thank you, Nadja. We're going to put all of your links down here, whether you want to reach out to her as an executive coach or you want to explore all of the programs of Conscious You and everything that you offer, or the See You Money program. Please check the book out. Where's the best social channel that people can connect with you? Is that LinkedIn? Or?
Yeah, I would say right now it's LinkedIn. Yeah.
Amazing. We also put that. So thank you so much for your time, for your energy, for your contribution.
Thank you, Judith, for having me on your podcast. I'm very honored.
Thank you. And everyone, please listen to also the last 10 podcast episodes if everything around this new financial system is something that you would love to explore more. There's a lot of explanations, and you can also find all of the links that I'm talking about in the episode description, so you can educate yourself and take this as a foundation to dig deeper.
Thanks for listening. I hope you really feel inspired and you gain new perspectives for your own ventures to take action. Remember to subscribe to the podcast, download the episode, and share with one visionary person who needs to also hear this. Also, please leave a 5-star review if that feels aligned on iTunes or on Spotify. That helps to distribute the podcast to more people and to have high caliber guests on for you to enjoy.